والصلاة والسلام على الأتمان الأكملان على خاتم النبيين وسيد المرسلين نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا وزدنا علما إلى علمنا ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم. Inshallah, we'll continue with reading from the book known as al-Awsat في السنن والإجماع والاختلاف لأبي بكر Muhammad ibn Ibrahim ibn al-Mundhir, rahimahullah ta'ala, who passed away in the year 318 after the Hijrah. And we're still in the section of the author's book that deals with al-Miyaah, Kitaab al-Miyaah, the section that deals with water. And we're at a chapter where the author, he says, ذِكْرُ الْبِئْرِ تَقَعُ فِيهَا النَّجَاسَةِ. What has been mentioned regarding wells in which some form of najasa falls into. Wells that najasa falls into them. And this topic, it's going to cover a couple of different things, or it covers a couple of different things. One, what is the ruling of such water? If water in a well has something najis fall into it, then what is the ruling of that well? Does the water become najis automatically? Does the water become najis after certain things happen? Does the water not become najis at all? Likewise, what about the salat that was made with that water? You have a well in which something najis falls into, and it might not be immediately identified that there is some najasa in that well. Its traces might have not have shown up in the water. And then after that, you find the traces, but you've already made wudu and you've already made salat. What is to be done in this circumstance? And then likewise, thirdly, how do you clean the water in the well? How is the water in the well to be cleaned if something najis falls into it? So all of these things are issues that are relevant to a well that has something najis fall into it. Does the water become najis? And if so, when and how? What is the ruling about the purification and the salat made with such water, especially before the traces of najasa show up? And how to clean such a well. And as always, this issue, it really only becomes problematic for those that say that a small amount of water becomes najis by simply mixing with something najis, or by simply mixing with najasa. And so for those individuals, you can have a well that could have a mouse or a chicken or something like that fall into and die, thus becoming Meta, Karen, and that water, according to them, would become najis, even though the traces of that animal that died therein don't automatically show up. And so people continue to drink and continue to use the water in that well to bathe and to make wudu, etc., to wash their clothes, to make their food. And then after a while, when that animal has been deceased long enough, for example, it might float to the top. And now the people become aware that it was najis. But time has passed. They have utilized that water. So what is the ruling on the salat that they prayed, the wudu that they made, the food that they prepared using such water? And likewise, how should that well be cleaned out once it is known that it is najis? So these are the issues that the author is going to touch on. And as we said, it really only becomes problematic for those who categorize water into three categories: tahur, tahir, and najis. And then from them are those who make the najasa two categories: that which has changed because of najasa, or a small amount that comes into contact with something that is najis, even if it doesn't change. And the author brings this chapter here after the previous chapter, in which he dealt with najis water mixing with pure water in small quantities, because the main argument or the main evidence used by the people who say that water doesn't become najis is the hadith of Abi Sa'id al-Khudri radiyallahu ta'ala anhu. And in that hadith there is mentioned a well known as Bir Buda'a, the well of, and Buda'a is like commodities, goods, items, things like this. And it was a well in which filthy items would be washed into by the flowing away of the rainwater. The rainwater would, push filthy items into it, kind of how our sewer system might be thought of with the drains and things like this. And so this well would have the filthy clothes from period blood or the carcasses of dead dogs and things like that pushed into it by the flowing drain water of the streets of Medina. And in this hadith, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, when asked about utilizing that well for purification, he said, "Al-ma'u tahur, or inna al-ma'a tahur la yunajjisuhu shay." Water is pure and purifying, tahur, nothing makes it najis. And so since that last topic that he presented was a topic that dealt with the result of this hadith, i.e., that water is pure, nothing makes it najis, and it came in context, or it came in the context of this well, Bir al-Buda'a, it was suitable to mention the rulings pertaining to wells specifically after that. And so the author, he says, dhikrul bir taqa'u fiha najasa. What has been mentioned regarding a well in which najasa falls into. The author, he says, rahimahullah ta'ala, اختلف أهل العلم في البئر تحل فيها النجاسة، فروينا عن علي أنه أمر بنزحها حتى يغلبها، وروي ذلك عن ابن الزبير. He says the people of knowledge are in disagreement as it relates to a well in which najasa settles into. And so it's been reported to us on the authority of Ali, radiyallahu ta'ala anhu, that he commanded that the well be yunzah, that water be extracted and taken out of the well. And nazah is to take the water out of the well, hatta yaghlibuhum, until they have taken out so much water that they don't feel that they can take out anymore. Right? So when we talk about the method in cleaning the well, you have the bucket, and this is, classical wells. Nowadays, our wells are just basically a pipe that we stick in the ground with a pump on it, and the water comes up from the water table and things like that without there having to be dug. That, classical image that you might have in your mind, that circular area in the ground in which they put blocks around it to stop the dirt from caving in on itself. And then at the bottom of the well, they have a stone that would be used to prevent the water from flowing into it, or to regulate the water, how much water can come into it, or to, to remove it, to allow the water to flow into it. And that's, how the wells used to look. And because the wells used to look like this, if they weren't built high above the ground, then if they were built flush with the ground, or perhaps barely off of the ground, then there would be a chance that things could fall into them. And so when things fell into them, to clean it out, you know, it could be a hardship to have to climb down into the bottom of the well where the najasa would settle at. Whatever fell into it would settle at the bottom. And because the bottom of the well has flowing water constantly running through it, it's constantly passing over that najasa. So how would you clean it out? And so the statement of Ali that he's mentioning here, he says that Ali radiallahu ta'ala anhu, he commanded that they yanzah, that they would extract the water from the well hatta yaglibuhum, until they were exhausted, until they felt they couldn't do anymore, until the well overpowered them. I.e., there's no limit, there's no specific amount of buckets that you need to extract. You just need to keep extracting until you feel that you've done as much as you could do. And once you felt that you've done as much as you could do to extract the filthy water out of this well, and obviously the taste, the color, and smell of the water have either returned or remained in their, unchanged state, then at this point in time, that's sufficient. As we said, this is mostly as it relates to when the water's smell, taste, or color doesn't change. As far as if the water's smell, taste, or color did change, then more extensive measures have to be taken. But if the taste, color, or smell of the water didn't change, how many buckets do you have to take out of the well and pour that water out until you could feel that the well has become pure again because of the najasa that fell inside of it? Ali radiallahu ta'ala anhu, he's saying, hatta yaglibahum, until that until that action of extracting the water has overpowered them, has exhausted them. So this is the first opinion about how to clean out such a well. Just keep taking out water until you feel that it has exhausted you. He says, and it's also been reported similar to this statement from Ibn Zubayr. Abdullah bin Zubayr, he had a similar statement about how to clean a well. And I can't reiterate enough, i.e., this is when the well's taste, color, or smell hasn't changed, but there is najasa that is present in it. But the author, he brings his narrations to support this statement that he's made for these individuals. He says, حدثنا علي بن عبد العزيز قال حدثنا حجاج قال حدثنا حماد and عطاء بن السائب and عطاء بن السائب أن ميسرة أن عليا رضي الله تعالى عنه قال في بئر وقعت فيها فأرة فماتت ينزح ماؤها. Ibn al-Mundhir, he says that Ali ibn Abdul Aziz narrated to us. He said that Hajjaj narrated to us. He said that Hamad narrated to us on the authority of Ata ibn as-Sa'ib, on the authority of Maysara, that Ali radiallahu ta'ala anhu said regarding a well in which a mouse falls into and then dies, that its water should be extracted. The water of that well should be extracted, taken out. So we know that this mouse, when it dies, it's an unslaughterable animal. And so when it dies, it's meta, and meta is najis. And so you have this small najis animal in this well, and the well, more often than not, is a small amount of water that is stable or settled at the bottom. And so here Ali is saying you have to extract the water from this well because of this mouse that has died therein. The next narration, he says, حدثنا محمد بن نصر قال حدثنا يحيى بن يحيى قال أخبرنا جرير عن عطاء بن السائب عن عطاء بن السائب عن عطاء بن السائب عن ميسرة وأصحاب علي رضي الله تعالى عنه قال علي رضي الله تعالى عنه إذا وقعت الفأرة في البئر فماتت فانتزحوها حتى تغلبكم. Ibn al-Mundhir, he says that Muhammad ibn Nasr narrated to us. He said that Yahya ibn Yahya narrated to us. He said that Jarir informed us on the authority of Ata ibn al-Sa'ib, on the authority of Maysara and other companions of Ali. They all said that Ali, radiallahu ta'ala anhu, said that if a mouse falls into a well and this, then right until you're exhausted, until that action of taking the water out, or حتى تغلب على ظنكم, or until you suppose or suspect that you've done enough. Now, this is the statement. The next statement, he says, حدثنا علي قال حدثنا أبو عبيد قال حدثنا هشيم قال أخبرنا منصور بن زاذان عن عطاه أن زنجيا مات في زمزم فأمر ابن الزبير أن ينزح منها حتى يغلبهم الماء. Ibn al-Mundhir, he says that Ali narrated to us. He said that Abu Ubaid narrated to us, who said that Hushaym narrated to us, who said that Mansur ibn Zadhan informed us on the authority of Ata, who said that a Zanji and a Zanj was how they used to refer to, Africa proper during that time, like not the Northern Sahara Africa, because that area, which was known as Africa at the time, Egypt was Misr, and then Libya and Tunis were known as Ifriqiya, and then Algeria, Morocco, Mauritania, all of that was known as al-Maghrib. So that's Northern Sahara. But, maybe what they call Southern Sahara, where, what we think about nowadays when we think about Africa, Africa proper or Africa prime, they used to call that area a Zinj or a Zanj with a feta or a kesra. And that's like the area of Sudan. And it's called Sudan because that's where the darker complexion people were, right? A Sudan, right? The people who were of darker complexion, who were in that sub-Sahara, Egypt, Ethiopia, right? Habasha, that area of Habasha, and then even further west of that. And a person from that area will be called Zenji, right? Putting the ya and nisba on it. Rajulun Zenjiyun. Now, so Ata, he says that a Zenji, a person of darker complexion, an African, right, from Africa, not from the Northern Sahara area, from Africa proper, and a Zenji, he died in the well of Zemzem. Right, an individual perhaps trying to get water out of it, perhaps trying to clean it. Allah knows best. Did he slip his head and fall in? Did he slip and hit his head and things like this? Allah knows best. But this individual dies in the well of Zemzem, right? So now there's a dead human body in the well of Zemzem. Now, the human body doesn't become najis upon death, but perhaps blood has escaped from this individual if he's cracked his head right on the well, and now he's bleeding into the well water, and the human blood is najis, according to a lot of opinions of scholars. Or perhaps, when an individual dies, there might escape from his bowels some feces or urine, which are najis, which could contaminate the water. And if nothing else, nobody wants to drink out of a well that there's a dead body in. So even if it doesn't become najis, we would have to ask ourselves, how do we clean it? And so when this individual died in the well of Zemzem, right? And so this is a big ordeal. This is Zemzem. They say, Amar ibn Zubayr and yunzahu minha. Ibn Zubayr, radiallahu ta'ala anhu, was in charge of Mecca, either before becoming the Khalifa or after becoming the Khalifa. That's where his main base of authority was, in Mecca. And so he commanded that the well be extracted, that the water in the well be extracted until the people felt overpowered by the water, i.e., until they've taken out so much water from the well of Zamzam or Zemzem that they didn't feel that they could do another bucket, that the water of Zemzem would have overpowered them. I just continue to remove from it and remove from it until you're exhausted. And so this is the statement of Ibn Zubair, which is similar to the statement of Ali, not putting any limit upon how much water should be extracted, but instead attaching that to the capability of the people to continue to extract until you feel that you can't extract anymore. Ibn al-Mundhir, he goes on, he says, وَقَالَ الْحَسَنِ فِي الْإِنسَانِ يَمُوتُ فِي الْبِئْرِ تُنْزَحُ كُلَّهَا وذكر أبو عبيد أن هذا قول سفيان وعليه أهل الرأي من الكوفيين يرون نزحها وإن أخرج من ساعته. They say that, or Ibn al-Mundhir, he says that, and as far as al-Hasan, yani Hasan al-Basri, he said regarding a human who dies in a well, if a person falls into a well and dies, he says that the entirety of the well needs to be extracted. Meaning, you need to extract every drop of water from that well. So you need to close off the entrance from which the fresh water pours into it, and then take out all of the water that is in the well without letting more water into it. Right? And that's the difference potentially between the two statements, because in the statement of Ali and Ibn Zubair, it's as if the water is consistently coming into the well. And I wish I had better, graphics and demonstration here. We could see how the wells look on the inside. There's going to come a narration that talks about the stone and things like that is at the bottom of the well. But it's basically like a stone, like you dig down until you hit the water table, right? The water that's under the surface of the ground. And then you build around what you've dug so that it doesn't collapse on itself. And that water is now flowing into the bottom of this hole that you've dug. And, perhaps you might dig a channel into the bottom of this well that will allow it to fill. And at the bottom where you've dug this channel, this entrance for the water to come in, you might put a stone there or something there to prevent the water from coming in as well. And so using that stone would be how you would regulate the entrance of water into the well, or the prevention of the water from entering into the well. And so, according to Hasan al-Basri, if a person dies into a well, then all of the water of the well needs to be extracted. You need to shut it off and extract all of the water out of the well. He says, and ذكر أبو عبيد أن هذا قول سفيان. Abu Ubaid al-Qasim ibn Salam, he has a book as well in purification known as Kitab al-Tahur. And he says that this is also the opinion of Sufyan. Wallahu ta'ala alam, Sufyan al-Thawri, right? He had a popular madhab at that time. And so the opinion of Sufyan would be to also extract all of the water out of the well. So you can't just stop when you've become exhausted or when you think you've done enough. You have to literally extract all of the water out of that well. And he says, وَعَلَيْهِ أَهْلُ الرَّأْيِ. And according to this opinion, or on this opinion, is the view of the people of al-Ra'i. Right? The people of al-Ra'i, Madrasatul Ra'i, like the Ahnaf, Abu Hanifa, and his teacher and his followers. They also had this opinion. The people of Ra'i min al-Kufiyin. Upon this view is the opinion of the people of Ra'i from the people of Kufa. They all say that it needs to all be extracted. The people of Ra'i from the people of Kufa, they all say that all of the water needs to be extracted, even if the body was taken out immediately. A person dies and falls into the well, and you take the body out immediately. It doesn't stay in the well for more than 2-3 minutes. In spite of that, they say no, the entirety of the well needs to be extracted. All of the water needs to be taken out, needs to be cleaned, and then you can start refilling it after that. So this is the view of the people of Ra'i, from the people of Kufa, and it's similar to the view of Sufyan and Hassan al-Basri. And this is, comparable to the view of Ibn Zubair and Ali, radiyallahu ta'ala anhu, or anhuma. Or anhum. So this is the first opinion. Multiple different levels of it, but the first opinion that the entirety of the well needs to be extracted, or a majority, a dominant amount of the well needs to be extracted. Ibn al-Mundhir, he goes on, he says, وَفِيهِ قَوْلٌ ثَانٍ روينا أن عطاء في الجرد قال ينزحون منها 20 دلوا وإن تفسخت نزحوا منها 40 دلوا. He says, and in this topic, I of cleaning the well, there is a second opinion. It's been reported to us on the authority of Ata. And perhaps here, this Ata is Ata ibn Abi Rabah, the Imam of Mecca. Right? In the previous narrations, we saw that the narrator was Ata ibn as-Sa'ib, who was from the people of Hadith, but he had some weakness in him. And then there's another Ata from the people of Hadith, Ata ibn Ata ibn Yasar, the brother of Sulaiman ibn Yasar. So you have three Ata. You have three people named Ata in the level of the Tabi'een that were, or even, Tabi'een, Atba' Tabi'een, that were very famous in narration. Ata ibn Yasar, the one who you find that often Zayd ibn Aslam narrates on him from the people of Hadith, from the Muhaddithun, who was in Medina and then later took up residency in Egypt. I believe he died in Alexandria. And then you have Ata ibn Abi Rabah, from the Imam of Mecca, the African, the freed slave who was the Imam of the Mufti of Mecca. And then you have Ata ibn as-Sa'ib, who, if I'm not mistaken, was from the people of Basra or Kufa. It's escaping me right now. Ata ibn as-Sa'ib. He was either from, I want to say Basra, but he could be from Kufa. Ata ibn as-Sa'ib. عطاء بن السائب أبو محمد ويقال أبو السائب الثقفي الكوفي صدوق اختلط من الخامسة مات سنة 36. His name was Ata ibn al-Sa'ib. His kunya was Abu Muhammad or Abu Sa'ib al-Thaqafi min Bani Thaqif al-Kufi. So he was from the people of Kufa. He was Saduq. He was a good guy, right? Not as strong as others. Ikhtalat. He got confused later on in life from the Khamisa, from the Sigar Tabi'een, or the Kibar Atba' Tabi'een. And he died in the year 136. So these are the three Ata. These are the three individuals named Ata. Here, Ibn al-Mundhir is saying there's a second view regarding this topic. So it's been related to us from Ata. And the Ata here is most likely Ata ibn Abi Rabah. And not even most likely, I'm almost 100% sure, and we'll see in the narration. Well, he doesn't bring a narration, but it's Ata ibn Abi Rabah because he was the individual who was known for fatwa. And he was the individual known for issuing verdicts and answering questions. And, his statements can be found in abundance, for example, in the Musannaf of Abdul Razak. Right? Ibn Jurayj, rahimahullah ta'ala, used to narrate from him in abundance. And from Ibn Jurayj would narrate Sufyan ibn Uyayna. And from Sufyan ibn Uyayna would narrate Abdul Razak, or Abdul Razak would narrate on Ibn Jurayj Kadalik directly as well. نعم, he says here, وفيه قول ثان روينا عن عطاء الجرد. He says it's been reported to us on the authority of Ata regarding al-Jird. And al-Jurd is a male mouse or a male rat, right? The male mouse, they call it al-Jurd. And then you have al-Fa'r, which is just a general concept, but the male one, they call it al-Jurd. And this might be even closer to what we might think of as rats, right? You might be thinking of a mouse like a field mouse, but al-Jurth is, the bigger, the more, the heftier in size, those rats, those mice. He says, وَقِيلَ الذَّكَرْ الْكَبِيرْ مِنَ الْفَأْرِ. It's also said that it's the extremely big male mouse or mice. And like we say in English, we might call them a rat, al-Jurth. So Atta, he said regarding al-Jurth, if a Jurth falls into a well and dies, he says that 20 buckets should be extracted from the well. So here he limits the amount of extraction that is needed, and he says it should be 20 buckets. Right? If the mouse falls into the well and dies, and then it's taken out soon, then 20 buckets of extracting is all that's needed. And then Ata, he goes on to say, وَإِن تَفَسَّخَتْ نَزَحُوا مِنْهَا 40 دَلْوَا. But if the mouse or the jurth, yani تَفَسَّخَتْ, yani, what's that word in English? If it becomes bloated, right, and you find that the water has caused it to bust open, like, when it's waterlogged, like a waterlogged corpse, when the water has affected the body until it's become bloated and its color has changed, and it's, it has that softness in its essence to where it's almost mush, and potentially it might even explode or, break apart. He says, وَإِن تَفَسَّخَتْ, if this happens to the dead rat that is in the well, then they need to extract from it 40 buckets. They need to extract from it 40 buckets. Like, sometimes we can think that these things aren't, relevant to us. Alhamdulillah, we live in an environment here in the West and in a lot of the world where, water flows out of our, taps. We just turn the faucet and water flows from it. But we have to remember that this water that flows from our taps comes from a location. It's not, magic. It's not anything of this nature. It comes from somewhere. And so these are the issues that are prevalent when we talk about the purification of water. And, we have modern technology that we use in our sewer systems here in the West for purifying our water, from the city and things like that. But a lot of that water is sewage water that is, refined and clean, or something that might be taken from the rivers. And, our rivers are in the condition that they're in, and the water will be refined and cleaned. So what are the necessary steps in cleaning this water? From from extracting water or pouring water out, from idafa, from adding water to the dirty water to make it clean, from water changing back to being in a pure state by itself, or from the modern day chemicals and techniques that we use to purify water. And that's as it relates to our city water or our county water. But there are many individuals, even here in America, who they build their water system is based off a well that they build or that they dig on their property. And so these rules become important to know, even here in America. Like if you buy land in Florida or, anywhere, Missouri here, if you buy a piece of land that isn't connected to the city's grid, you have to dig a well. And, that well will be the source of water for your home. And likewise, your septic systems and things like that, if they leak, and they might leak into your groundwater, and all of these things become important issues for the individual to know. And so one shouldn't think that this information is no longer relevant, because we still actually use and consider this information in how we obtain that which Allah has blessed us with from, flowing, tap water and running water in our homes. Now, so that's the second opinion. The opinion of Atta, that they should take out 20 buckets if the animal hasn't decomposed, and they should take out 40 buckets if the animal has begun to decompose in the water. He says, وَفِيهِ قَوْلٌ ثَالِث وَهُوَ أَنْ يُسْتَقَى مِنْهَا 40 دلوة أو نحوي هكذا قال النخعي في الفأر تقع في البئر. He says there's a third opinion in this issue as well, and it is that one should extract from it 40 buckets or something similar to that. And like this, it was stated by a Nakhai regarding a mouse that falls into a well. This mouse falls into the well. And Nakhai, Ibrahim ibn Yazid al-Nakhai, he said that you should take out 40 or something odd buckets of water to purify that well. And so it's similar to the second opinion of Atta, but he just makes 40 a general statement, whether the animal can decomposed or didn't begun to decompose. And they use another word here. The previous word was nazaha. And nazaha, like you see them talking about it, sometimes they use it to mean pour out, and sometimes they use it to mean extract. So when they talk about the well, you can't pour out a well. So when they say yunzahu minha, that you should extract the water from it. But if it was something other than a well, it could mean to pour out, right? To pour some of that water out. Like if you have a container that has, najis water in it, then one of the ways of purifying it is to pour some of that water out. He says, Noon was zay wal ha kalimatun tadullu ala al-bu'd. نزحت الدار نزوحا بعدت وبلدا نازح ويقال نزحت البئر استقيت ماءها كلها. Right? And so the word, it means to extract. In this narration, he uses the word istaqa. And istaqa min as-suqi or min as-saqi, which is to pour, right? But obviously you can't pour a well, and so you have to extract the water of the well out in totality. In Ibn Faris, he says in Maqayis al-Lugha that a nazh is to extract the entirety of the well, but that's not the case. It's just to extract. As you see, they mention extracting 40 buckets from it. And so the word can it doesn't by default mean to take it out in totality. Now, so this is the opinion of an-Nakhai. He says that one should extract 40 or something odd buckets from the well if a mouse dies in it, or if a mouse falls in it. He says, Yani Ibn al-Mundhir, he says, وَرُوِينَ عَنِ الشَّعْبِ أَنَّهُ قَالَ فِي الدَّجَاجَةِ تَمُوتُ فِي الْبِئْرِ يُسْتَقَى مِنْهَا 70 دِلْوَةً وَقَدْ رُوِيَ. So here he says this is now a fourth opinion. He says it's been reported to us on Ash-Sha'bi. Ash-Sha'bi, Amir ibn Sharahil Ash-Sha'bi, he said that if a chicken falls into a well, then you should extract from it 70 buckets. If you have a chicken that falls into a well and i.e. dies in it, then you should extract from it 70 buckets. He says, وَقَدْ رُوِينَا عَنْ بَعْضِهِمْ عَمَّنْ بَعْدَهُمْ في هذه المسألة أقوالا مختلفة. سئل الأوزاعي عن ماء معين وجد فيه ميتة لم يغير الماء قال ينزح منها دلاء ولا يوقت ما ينزح منه. He says, and we've narrated on the individuals after them, i.e. after this generation of tabi'in, right? Because most of the people that we mentioned up until now are tabi'un, or considered amongst the tabi'un, like Ibrahim al-Nakhai, even though he didn't meet any Sahaba directly, or narrate on any Sahaba directly, He's considered amongst the tabi'un from his nobility. And so Ibn al-Mundhir, he's saying it's been reported to us on those after them, those after the tabi'in, the atba' tabi'in. In this topic, it's been reported to us on those after them in this topic, lots of differing opinions or lots of differing statements. So al-Awza'i, right? And al-Awza'i, he had Abdurrahman ibn Amr al-Awza'i, rahimahullah ta'ala, who was the Imam of the people of Asham. He had a madhab in Asham that was followed and his madhab was the prominent madhab in North Africa before the spread of the madhab of Imam Malik. Abdul Rahman ibn Amr al-Awza'i. عبد الرحمن بن عمرو بن أبي عمرو الأوزاعي أبو عمرو ثقة فقيه جليل مات سنة 57. He died in the year 175. I'm sorry, 157. He died in the year 157. So he's a little bit older than Malik, right? He passed away a little bit before Malik. But his madhab was one that was popular in the Levant area, Sham, Jordan, Palestine, Syria, Lebanon, and from there it spread to North Africa. And then after the prominence of Imam Malik, rahimahullah ta'ala, that became the madhab of the people of North Africa in general, right? When the students of Imam Malik traveled to Egypt, and from there it spread to Northern Africa and to Andalus, Muslim Spain. But al-Awza'i, he said regarding the water of a ma'in, and a ma'in is a spring. If I'm not mistaken, that's how you would translate it, right? Al-ain, they call it sometimes in ma'in, because you could also say pure or like crystal water and things like that. But here, it's Allah's best is referring to water in a spring, right? So a spring is something that's similar to a well, right? You have the water that shoots up out of the ground, even though it's not man-fashioned, right? It has the water that collects at the bottom of the spring, and then water shoots out of it at times. Al-yanbur or al-ain or al-ma'in. So he is asked about, al-Awza'i was asked about the water of a spring where a dead body is found in it. I just want to double check. Is there another way to say ma'in? Like, do they have another way of explaining it? Ma'in. ثم لتسألون يومئذ عن النعيم. That's na'im, ma'in. I'm pretty sure that's the only way that they would translate it is spring. Ain. And I would say it's a makan from the meme. It's a makan. Ain. Yeah, I don't even see. And then own, maybe. No. Ma'in, because you could use it as supporter, helper, assistant as well. That's mu'in. That's mu'in. From a'ana, min al-aun. Ala kulli hal, so al-Awza'i, he was asked about water in a spring or spring water, that a dead body is found inside of it, but it hasn't changed the quality of the water. The taste, the color, the smell, it hasn't changed. He said, yunzahu minha dila'un. He said that buckets should be extracted from it. وَلَا يُوَقَّتْ مَا يُنْزَحُ مِنْ. and he didn't stipulate how many should be extracted. Right? So this is now statement number 5. Right? Just take out buckets, but he didn't specify how many buckets should be taken out, nor did he qualify it like was done by Ali and Ibn Zubayr. And so this was the view of al-Awza'i. You should take some buckets out of that water, but he didn't specify how many. لم يوقت ما ينزح منه. He says, يعني al-Awza'i, وإن غير الريح وإن غير ريح الماء أو طعمه فلا بد من نزحه حتى يصفو ولا يوقت أبو عمرو ما ينزح منه. He said, and if the smell of the water has changed or its taste, then it's necessary that water be extracted from it until it becomes clear again, until it becomes pure again. And Abu Amr, yani al-Awza'i, he did not specify how much should be extracted. وكذلك قال ليث بن سعد فيه إذا غير ريح الماء أو طعمه. And this was also the opinion of Layth ibn Sa'd. Layth ibn Sa'd was the imam of the people of Misr, Egypt, during his time, a contemporary of Imam Malik, one who, Ash-Shafi'i, rahimahullah ta'ala, he said about that Layth was more knowledgeable than Malik, except that the students of Layth didn't support him the way the students of Imam Malik supported him. So Layth ibn Sa'd was an extremely well-known scholar during that time who had a madhab in the people of Egypt. And so the statement of Layth ibn Sa'd is similar to that of al-Awza'i. He says, if the smell of the water is changed, i.e. by that najasa, by that dead body, or its taste, i.e. buckets should be extracted until it becomes pure. He says, وقال الثوري في بغل راث في بئر قال ينزح منها دلاء حتى تطيب قيل له فما صلوا قال أرجو أن يجزئهم. الثوري rahimahullah, yani Sufyan al-Thawri, Sufyan ibn Sa'id ibn Masruq al-Thawri, who died in the year 161 rahimahullah, from the imams of Kufa, who had a madhab amongst the people of Kufa. He said regarding a mule, a mule, that, a mule is a mixture between a donkey and a horse, so it's smaller than a horse, and it's najis, right? Al-humr al-ahli, right, is najis, and so like this, they say the mule is najis as well. So Al-Thawri was asked about a mule that falls into a well, right, that falls and dies and starts to filthify a well. He said buckets of it should be extracted, i.e. buckets of that water should be extracted until that water becomes good again. Hatta tatib, until that water becomes good again. It was said to him, what about the prayers that they've already prayed? Right, and this, like we said, this is because when that animal, falls into that water or filthifies that water, maybe it bathed in that water or, sat in that water and nobody knew, and the water's taste, color, or smell didn't change, but the view of these scholars is that the water still becomes najis. And then they find out, maybe they find the traces of the dead animal, or somebody comes afterwards and tells them, no, I saw a donkey in that water or a mule in that water earlier. And so here, what about the salat that they already prayed? What about the salat that they've already prayed with that water before they found out its condition? Asif. Al-Thawri rahimahullah ta'ala, he said regarding the salat that they already prayed, he said, Arju an yajzi'ahum. I hope that what they prayed is good enough for them. I.e., even though the water, according to their view, was najis, because they didn't know and they already prayed, and there were no clear signs of najasa in that water, I hope that what they prayed was good enough for them. This is the statement of authority. And that statement, like I say, it's not even an issue for those of us who say that water doesn't become najis until its taste, color, or smell changes. And instead, the statement of authority is even a support for us, because if that water was najis, then they would have to repray. But one can argue that there's no obligation with ignorance and things like that, and they did the best that they could. So even if that water was najis, they wouldn't have to repray. But the point of it is that this is the statement of authority regarding a mule that ends up in the water. Let's finish up. He says, قال النعمان في العصفور والفأر تقع في البئر فتخرج حين ماتت قال يستقى منها 20 دلوة أو 30 دلوة فإن كانت دجاجة أو سنورة فاستخرجت حين ماتت ف40 دلوة أو 50 دلوة وإن كانت شاء فانزحها حتى يغلبك الماء وإن كان شيء من ذلك قد انتفخ أو تفسخ فانزحها. You might have heard me mention before that when people start getting extremely detailed in an issue, when there is no evidence for that, then this is something that kind of shows the weakness of that opinion. And so here he says that Nu'man, yani Nu'man ibn Thabit, Abu Hanifa rahimahullah ta'ala, Nu'man ibn Thabit. He says that Nu'man said regarding the asfur, the sparrow, right, the small bird, or the mouse that falls into a well and it is taken out the moment it dies, i.e. immediately, that you should extract from that well 20 or 30 buckets. And if it was a chicken or a cat, if the thing that died in the well was a chicken or a cat, then you should extract from it, and that animal is taking out immediately, i.e. immediately after it dies, you should extract from the well 40 or 50 buckets. He says, and if it was a sheep or a goat, a shah, which can be a sheep or a goat, then extract from the water then extract from the well until the water overpowers you. And if it was something, and if any one of these things, the sparrow, the mouse, the sheep, the goat, the chicken, the cat, if any one of these things became bloated in the water or began to decompose in the water, then you have to extract the entirety of the well. So this is now 4, 5, 6, 7 opinions, right? And this opinion of Abu Hanifa, you see there's an extreme amount of tafsil in it, an extreme amount of detail. And you can see the logic that Abu Hanifa is using, right? The size of the animal, has an effect on the amount of najasa that is transmitted by it, as well as the condition of the animal. So when the condition becomes one that decomposes and dissolves into the water, then no, you have to take out the entirety of the well. He says, قال سفيان الثوري في الوزغ يقع في البئر قال يستقى منها دلاء. Sufyan al-Thawri, he said regarding a wazagh, right, that lizard that falls into the well, he says that you should extract from it, i.e. from that well, buckets. And in this version, he doesn't specify how many, right? And this is the same thing that was mentioned on Sufyan previously. So these are the opinions that Ibn al-Mundhir presents in this issue. Here he's going to refute them, basically. He says, قال أبو بكر فأما في قول الشافعي ومن قال بقلتين فالماء الساقط فيه الفأر الميتة وغير ذلك من النجاسات في بئر كان ذلك أو غيره إذا كان قلتين فليس ينجس ذلك الماء إلا بأن تغير النجاسة طعم الماء أو لونه أو ريحه. Abu Bakr, he says that as far as according to the statement of a Shafi'i and those who hold the view of qullatain, those who say that water, when it reaches qullatain, it doesn't become najis, then any water in which a mouse or a dead mouse falls into, or other than that from najis substances, when they fall into a well or into any other type of water, if that water was qullatain, then that water doesn't become najis unless it changes its taste, i.e., unless that item changes unless the najasa changes the taste of the water or its color or its smell. Right? This is obvious. If the water is more than qullatain, then we're kind of all in agreement in that issue. He says, but there is an exception, and this is from the mufradat of the madhab of Imam Ahmed. He says, إلا أن أحمد كان يستثني البول والعذرة الرطبة قيل لأحمد في الدابة تقع في البئر قال كل شيء لا يغير ريحه ولا طعمه فلا بأس به إلا البول والعذرة الرطبة. Imam Ahmed, well, let's read the statement first. He says, except that Imam Ahmed, he used to make an exception, right? If it was qullatain or less than qullatain, if it was a containable amount of water, Imam Ahmed made an exception that nothing makes it najis. He said no. Imam Ahmed excluded from this urine and wet feces. Akramakumullah. And here we should say of a human, right? The madhab is of a human. Bawl al-adimi wa adiratuhu al-ma'iyah, right? The urine of a human or his wet feces, like diarrhea type feces, right? That type of feces that kind of, that kind of mixes in with the water, right? So Imam Ahmed, he excluded this from that which doesn't filtrify the water unless it changes its taste, color, or smell. He said, no, just its presence in the water automatically makes the water najis, even if it's a large amount, right? When we're talking about containable bodies of water, if you have a well or a tub or something of this nature, a container, what do they call those things? A cistern or a tank of water, even if it's a large amount, if there's some urine, like a swimming pool, right? We talk about people who go swimming and some of them might urinate in the swimming pool. According to Imam Ahmed, this would make the swimming pool najis, right? Because it's a containable amount of water and he didn't include urine and human feces from that which doesn't make a large amount of water najis. So Ibn al-Mundhir, he says that Imam Ahmed, it was said to him regarding an animal that dies in a well, he said anything that dies, everything that doesn't change the taste, anything that doesn't change the smell or taste, then there's no harm in it, unless it is urine or moist feces, right? And here you have to add the additional statement of a human, right? We know the opinion of Imam Ahmed is that of a human. He says, قال إسحاق كما قال. Ishaq ibn Rahuya had the same opinion as Imam Ahmed in this issue. He said, قال والبول والعذرة لا ينجسان إلا ما كان من الماء أقل من قلتين. He says here in the view that the urine and the feces, the wet feces, they only filtrify that which is less than qullatayn. As far as if it's more than qullatayn, then you could say no, even in the view of Imam Ahmed and Ishaq, that it doesn't filtrify it just by coming into contact. While some of them say, yes, no, even still it does, right? But you'll find different statements in the madhab about that. But the point of it is he says that Ishaq, he said similar to what Imam Ahmed said, and that urine and feces, they do not make something najis. They do not make water najis unless it is less than qullatayn. He says, فَأَمَّا مَذْهَبُ مَنْ يَرَى أَنَّ قَلِيلُ الْمَاءِ وكثيره لا ينجس بحلول النجاسة فيه إلا أن يتغير طعمه أو لونه أو ريحه فالبئر وغيرها في ذلك سواء. Here he gives the other view. He says, and as far as those who are upon the madhab, the view, where they say that a small amount of water or a large amount of water do not become najis simply by coming into contact with something that is najis, unless that najasa changes the taste, color, or smell of that water, then this is regardless if that water is inside of a well or other than it. All of it is the same. And we've explained that enough, inshallah. The last paragraph, he says, وَالَّذِي نَقُولُ بِهِ فِي هَذَا الْبَابِ وَفِي غَيْرِهِ مِنْ أَبْوَابِ الْمَاءِ أَنَّ قَلِيلَ الْمَاءِ وَكَثِيرَهُ لا ينجسه شيء في نهر كان أو غيره بأن سقطت فيه نجاسة إلا أن يغير للماء طعما أو لونا أو ريحا وقد ذكرت الحجة فيه في باب ذكر الماء القليل يخالطه النجاسة. He says, and as far as the view that we have adopted in this topic, and in other than it, from the topics that are relevant to water, then it is, i.e., the view that he has adopted is that a small amount of water or a large amount of water, nothing makes it najis, whether it was in a river or in other than that. It does not become najis by simply something najis coming into contact with it, unless that najis substance changes the taste, color, or smell of the water. And I have mentioned the evidences that support this view in the chapter, i.e., the previous chapter, in which we mentioned a small amount of water that comes into contact or that mixes with something najis. So this is the conclusion of this view. And like we said, at the end of it, you walk away from it understanding these three issues. The issue of, does the well water become najis if something najis falls into it? And that is based on the disagreement that you have in this issue from the classification of najis water. We mentioned those opinions. Likewise, the salat that was prayed from that water. And there's other narrations that talk about what to do with the food, the bread that was made from that water and things like that. But we saw the statement of Sufyan that he said, يَجْزِئُهُمْ أَرْجُو أَنْ يَجْزِئُهُمْ. And then, thirdly, the issue of how to clean that well. And that's what the majority of this conversation was about. And it's the foundation upon which we build our modern technology of how to clean what we have from sewer water and from, river water that we, pump into our houses. And even from this, it comes the issue of, like with astronauts, where they, recycle their urine to get water. And what's the ruling of that? Right? All of these issues, stem from this issue. We'll stop at that amount. هذا وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على عبده ورسوله نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك. The next chapter that we'll pick up next time is what has been mentioned regarding making wudu with najis water, that the individual who prayed didn't know it was najis until after he had already offered salah. That's the next time, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.